So I had just recently moved, which you could probably tell based off of the previous videos and the newer ones. But when I was unpacking, you know how sometimes when you move from high school to college and then from dorms to off campus, on campus, like whatever, your 20s are just so full of moving that you kind of forget what you packed. That happened to me recently. And I found this guy. Now, this guy may look like a notebook full of duct tape, and you would be right. But more than that, this was this was an old assignment journal that I used to use for my creative writing class in high school. Like, this is so old, it still has my name before I legally changed it. That's how old this guy is. And it was really, really fun to look through old stories that I used to write and that were on my mind at the time. And I found out a lot of things about myself, including I was very Mormon. I forgot how Mormon I was until I started reading some of these stories. And I realized that out of all of the stories I wrote in that journal, the only one that I remembered, I actually didn't write in this journal. I actually wrote it on a separate sheet of paper when I was bored out of my mind in math class. So I figured if I was going to do original content as a bucket, as a content bucket of a storytelling channel, I think it's fair to kind of restart from where I had started 10 years ago now, maybe 11. So in this video for the Borealis Company, I'm going to break down how I rewrote an old poem that I wrote in high school. Now, the way that I want to do this, because I want this to be valuable to you guys, is I'm going to break down 3 things that I really wanted to keep track of while I was rewriting this poem, essentially from memory, revising it based off of the decade of growth that I've gone through since I first wrote it. And I want these 3 things to be of value to you as a creative, not just as a writer or a poet, but just as a creative. So I have a separate video that's going to come out, if it's not already out, that is just the poem plus an abstract painting that I was painting while I kind of saw this poem in my head. And in this one, I really just want to break down how this was done. So the first thing that I really wanted to do with this, and this is something that I really enjoyed about the original version, was I wanted to minimize the story structure. So, I mean, you could probably read it if you paused enough, if you pause long enough. But this story is really about 6 sets of 3 lines each. That's it. So it's 18, technically 20 lines. That's the whole thing. But you can kind of tell that I structured it in a very, very specific way. So this poem, called The Playground, is about a romance that kind of blossoms over the span of 2 people's lifetimes, and each line takes place at certain parts of a playground. So the first line is, "We were 5 on the playground. I pulled your hair on the slide. You punched me down the climbing wall." I think I swapped those actually when I was when I kind of finalized it. But that's it. That's all you get for that scene. And then it moves on to the next one. And I wanted to kind of break down each scene in the story based off of significant moments in a kid's life. So the first one, obviously, is during kindergarten. And then the next one is at the end of elementary school. The next one is at the end of middle school, which if you were a kid like me and grew up being educated by the Clark County School District, that's kind of how it's structured. I know it's not the case with everybody, but yeah, end of elementary school, end of middle school, and then the end of high school, and then possibly the end of college, and then the last set of lines is them in adulthood. And I think that by giving just enough that people understand, it kind of helps paint a better idea of the emotional behavior of each of the characters in this poem. Um, because obviously, when you're 5, you act very differently than when you're 10 or even 13 when puberty hits and suddenly, boys discover girls, girls discover boys, that kind of thing. And then when you're 17 and you're finishing high school, about to really step into the world for the first time, or when you're in high school and you're about to step into college, and then when you're 22, where if you didn't do any gap years and kind of stayed the course, um, you finish all of your education and you really do step into the real world. I wanted that um, to kind of give more value to each of these lines. And so that was really my first tip to myself. It was minimize the story structure. And I found that it helped me be a little more narrow and a little more focused in the story that I was telling with this, which leads me to the next point. I wanted to ground the world building. So the reason why it's called The Playground is because the entire thing, scene by scene, even though it kind of has a When Harry Met Sally structured timeline, which was funny because I didn't see When Harry Met Sally for the first time until like a year or two ago. So the whole thing is grounded by this world building. And so it kind of creates these healthy boundaries for me to tell this story. So that way the story doesn't get away from me, which I think is what happens in a lot of world building. It's you get so focused on what's on the other side that you really forget kind of your primary goal. So by keeping each line about a certain part of a playground, it helped me kind of stay true to what I was writing. And if you listen to The Playground, I never repeat the same, what do we call them? Installation, I guess. I never repeat the same part of a playground twice. And I kind of wanted them to be a little thematic. Like in the second one, we were 10 on the playground. You backflipped off the monkey bars. I broke my arm on the rope ladder. I wanted each part of the playground to have kind of a purpose and a significance to both the age and the action that they were doing. So that way it makes the growth and the maturity of each character make sense. At least that was the hope. That's kind of up to you to decide. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to do, and I don't know if I achieved this very well, but it's still good advice no matter what. I left blanks to be filled in the poem. So when I was doing research on how to rewrite this, I was getting kind of mixed advice and contradictory advice on what makes a good poem. For some people, it's word choice. For some people, it's word count, which is true for some cases. Like if I was writing a haiku, obviously word count is important, and as a result, word choice is important. But then you get stuff like the Iliad or the Odyssey, which are epics. It's very different, but they're still poems. So I kind of wanted to meet somewhere in the middle, and because I'm learning songwriting and music production right now, this feels more like song lyrics with no tune, which already that's a debate too that I saw a lot of whether or not lyrics are considered poems or if they're considered their own kind of writing. That's not the subject of this video. That's not really something I'm going to get into. But it was something to think about for sure. But I think even then, if you leave just enough for the audience to fill in the blanks, it becomes more personal because now you as an audience member have to decide what it means. And so by figuring out what it means for you, it has more power. And these are very clear about what the action is doing. So that's why I feel like I didn't really leave blanks to fill. But what I didn't really, but any blanks that I didn't leave to fill in the scene, I wanted to fill with emotion. So subtextually, I feel like there was some blanks that an audience member could fill. And whether or not they do, that's kind of up in the air. We won't really know until people read the poem. But, by saying something like, like the "we were five on the playground" bit, there's some debate, or you can kind of see it in different ways. Maybe it's just them being kids. Maybe the boy was being a punk ass. Maybe he really did like her. Maybe it was all three. Maybe it was none of those three. That's kind of the blank that I was looking to have filled with this poem. It allows you to kind of bring in your own experiences and your own ideas of these scenes, and that's kind of the color of these scenes. So really, it's almost like I built a coloring book, but you get to decide which colors. That was the intention with this poem. So yeah, that was pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna end it off with the 3 tips of advice for creatives that I applied for this poem. Number 1 was minimize the story structure. Number 2 was ground your world building. And number 3 was leave blanks to be filled. And I think if you really apply those in appropriate circumstances, you're going to make a very powerful and impactful, at least, narrative. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Again, keep an eye out for that poem video if you haven't seen it yet. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more insights and original storytelling. And let me know in the comments below if you have found anything like this for yourselves, or what your thoughts are on poetry as a storytelling device and medium. But yeah, in the meantime, enjoy your day.